Welcome everyone to Every Separation is a Link. This will be our third week of the Festival of Friendship, and I'm very happy to have with us Dr. Luis Mendoza from Arizona State University. I'm an ASU grad myself, a recent one, just a couple of years ago. I'm a late bloomer, but I was so excited that he was willing to join us for this. Dr. Mendoza is the director of the School of Humanities, Arts, and Cultural Studies at Arizona State, and also a professor of literature and cultural studies there. And he's teaching in the PEN Project, which is a unique program that pairs students at Arizona State with correctional inmates, mentoring them, if I'm not mistaken, in their writing. Anyway, Dr. Mendoza, it's great to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for asking me.
When I was a student at Arizona State, and I read about the PEN Project, it was something that I wanted to participate in. I was very excited about it. Unfortunately, my schedule just never allowed it. But it's always been in the back of my mind that this is such a unique program. And in fact, I think it's the only such program in America. But I was wondering if you could tell us about the program, how it got started.
Sure. About 10 years ago in 2010, an employee at New Mexico Correctional Department contacted ASU because they'd heard about other prison education work that had been taking place in the Department of English at the Tempe campus. And she was wanting to set up inmates in a maximum security prison to have an outlet, to talk, to write. And she worked with a professor there, Joe Lockhart, to develop the PEN Project. And what they did was set up this internship for students, a semester-long internship, to basically have a, for lack of a better word, a kind of a long-distance, almost like correspondent-like internship project in which everybody's identity was anonymized, but nevertheless, the liaison in New Mexico would send the creative writings of inmates there to the professor, and the student interns would have pseudonyms they used, and they would provide feedback. And hence began what has been going on for 10 years. Approximately 30 to 40 students a semester work with, anywhere from 30 to 60 or 70 inmates. And they give feedback. I think each professor probably sets it up differently. I'm not quite sure what others have done in the past in terms of how many cycles in a semester. The way I've set it up now, we actually are going through 7 different cycles in a semester. And we have students working throughout the semester in groups. So each inmate will get feedback from 2 or 3 students. So they get different perspectives on their writing. And they fill out a form saying, here's who I imagine my audience is. Here's the kind of genre I imagine I'm writing. I'm aiming for creative nonfiction, or I'm aiming for poetry for young kids, or I'm aiming for, this is kind of a prayer, or this is merely reflective, or this is my life story. It could be a whole range of things, but what we often get are deeply personal reflections on their life. Sometimes, this semester we've gotten science fiction. We've gotten, again, love poems, just a whole host, anything you can imagine. And sometimes they're grounded in the reality of their lives and thinking about that. Or sometimes they're just completely imaginary worlds. And so it's really fantastic because it serves as an outlet. It really also, I hate to say this, but given the way discourse is about prisoners in society, it really humanizes the prisoners to the students. While they might be English students who are familiar with writings from across time and different cultures, this is really an entree into a world in which they had very little experience with. And so it really makes them understand the full depth of their humanity. It helps them think about how the prison system functions in society, to what extent we need to continually think about how we can make it more functional and emphasize more the reform aspects versus the punishment aspects of prison. And because they also read a lot of other studies about prison, and they read published writing, and they read published prisoner writing. So they're exposed to a really wide range of literature, and I would say both, again, qualitative stuff like creative writing, but also social science studies of the number of prisoners that we have in the United States, and how this has increased and what kind of policies have impacted that increase. And then they understand the value of education in the prison system for setting a basis for reform, for when people get out, to have a better sense of their lives and the choices that they make, and to have a better themselves as well. So it really does impact both, I believe, the prisoners as well as the students in a really profound way.
If you'll permit me, I'd like to read something off the Arizona State website. This is about their prison education programming. And it says, ASU's prison education programming begins with the belief that education is a right that inheres within our humanity. It is not a right that stops at a prison's gates. Education needs to traverse borders and boundaries, including prison boundaries. And I'm wondering, the Penn Project, was that the first, basically the first program that happened, and then the prison education program blossomed from that? Or was the prison education program already in place and the Penn Project sort of grew out of that?
The prison education project was already in place. People were going out to a couple of different sites in Arizona and holding classes behind bars, so to speak, which is the traditional model, which is very good, of course, because it's in person. People feel like they're in a college class. They had not been able to arrange college credit, but nevertheless, it was still very beneficial and educational for everyone involved. But this, in fact, just opens up another way to make this happen. And oftentimes, people in maximum security aren't allowed access to educational programs. So this opens up that door for them. And what it requires is having a liaison at the prison who can screen the work, because we do set limits. You know, we don't want stuff that's going to be too offensive, or we don't want people trying to form personal relationships. So we screen the works to make sure that it maintains a certain level of expectations to protect the program and everybody involved.
I'm curious, just as a practical matter, how does this work? Like because you said names are kept anonymous, and so how is the inmates' work given to the ASU students, and how is their feedback returned to the inmates?
So I've just taken over the program this year. This is my first semester teaching it, which again, it's everything I expected it to be. It's very rewarding. I receive a packet from our liaison, Leah Weed, in New Mexico Correctional Department every other week, and I scan those. And she has, prior to receiving them, the inmates are assigned what they call a PIN name, a PIN project name, and they have a name and then a number. And our students have a name as well. So when I receive these, I decide, okay, how many pages do I have? How can I distribute these among students? And I create groups, whether it's 3 poems or a long story. And again, things vary so much. We had one writer submit a 35 single-page story to us this semester, and other times we get half-page poems or a very brief paragraphs, and somebody's just beginning to start writing, and so they may just write a few sentences. But as our students have recognized, it takes a lot of courage to submit, to make oneself vulnerable to feedback. And so they send us that writing. They have a pseudonym on it. And then I organize the writing into groups and distribute it to students. And then they retype the work, because students are often writing with pencil on the, wherever they can. And so they type it up so it looks more professional, and the students get that back, and the inmates get that back. And then they do an analysis. When we talk about the kind of feedback, we want it to be affirmative. We want it to be real feedback, though. What can make it better? Some of the students go all out and look for, here's a poem by Edgar Allan Poe that I think is similar to what you were trying to achieve. Let me share this poem with you. And they'll find other similar types of work of that genre, and to help make clear what their recommendations are for how it might be improved. And they show them somebody who's done this really well. So they provide detailed feedback at every level, both in terms of, what was the message of the work? Did it adhere to genre? How was it, they provide a affirmation for the effort. And many times they will go then into the micro level of the sentence level, grammar, punctuation, these things, recognizing, of course, that authors have license to do whatever they want, especially in poetry. You know, somebody can purposely not capitalize or purposely not have punctuation. And so they try to recognize that as well. So they're not trying to make them conform, but they're trying to say, here's where I think this would work. Or it appears you're using this really cool rhyme scheme throughout your work, but here's where it broke down. So how about going back and trying to fix that? Because then it would be really great. So and then I send those back via a PDF to the correctional department liaison, and she groups them up and sends them out to them. And then they actually write back when they want. They're not required to do this, but to give feedback on the feedback. Like, I really appreciated this, or this was very constructive, or here's what I thought. And so again, it's this sort of, they're building a relationship and of respect and communication. And at the end of the semester, and we've just finished one short, what we call, since ASU has all these different level semesters, we just finished a short 7.5-week semester where I have students online. And they write a letter to the inmates saying what they got out of the program. And if we have a chance, I'd like to read you a few lines from one of those, because I think those are really great in terms of talking about what the students get out of it. It's not one way, it flows both ways. You want me to go ahead and read something?
Yes, please. That would be great.
Okay. So this is from somebody whose pseudonym is named Jess. Dear Pen Project authors, I'm writing to thank you all for sharing your work with my fellow interns and me as part of this project. With each new batch of writings, you have shown me so much about the resilience of the human spirit. Your poetry and stories, whether purely fictional or based on the facts of your lives, have been inspiring reminders of the power of artistic expression to connect people across time and space, and even through walls. Reading your thoughts and experiences has truly opened my eyes to multiple different perspectives and ways of looking at the world. And for that, I'm immensely grateful to you all. While I am grateful for your decision simply to share your writing, I would like to add that I also truly appreciate each of you for your willingness to seek out feedback. As I wrote to some of you in my individual response to your writing, it takes a lot of courage to share a piece of yourself with others as you have done. It takes even more courage and a commitment to self-growth to be open to suggestions and criticism that someone may have to offer. Nonetheless, I'm sure you've come to recognize a fresh set of eyes can help you to see your work in new light and provide insights on aspects of a piece when you may have been too close to see it clearly for yourselves. So again, she goes on. It's a 2-page letter, okay? And they really, I think, what I most respect from again, both ways, both the students and the inmates, is their honesty, a sense of vulnerability, a sense of like saying, this is what you're giving me. And I think that kind of dynamic must be refreshing, especially for the inmates who probably have, limited opportunities to communicate with people about, in a sense, in a professional way, like you get some really sustained critique and observations of their work.
Have you had any of the inmates actually get published?
Well, again, this is my first semester, but in fact, the former director of this program who took over from Joe Lockhart in 2015, Corey Wells, a professor at English at ASU, she runs a magazine called Orange City, in which we then can recommend inmates to say, send your work to this magazine. And then there's a great many prison literature magazines out there across the country, but this is a local one. And I think many of them feel some connection to that because of the proximity, because this has had a long-standing relationship with the Pen Project. So we definitely plan to recommend some of them to submit their works to Orange City for publication. And that's a whole different level of review, but I do imagine they will. And it's pretty common for many of them to get published there.
Have you had, it's the theme of the festival this year is You Will Be Found. And so it's easy to see where the inmates are found. They're desperate to be found. In terms of the students, have any of them been so changed by this that they actually pursue a career in this direction and in dealing with inmates in some way?
Yeah, a number of them do, or they go on to become teachers themselves in ground courses. Like they go out to Florence or to one of the local prisons and do work out there. So they think about it like that. They also, for some of them, it may not be direct prison education work or prison advocacy work, although for many of them, I think it is, because there's also a local prison education and activist group that advocates for inmates, we often have them present to the students so they can think about how to get further involved. So there is that. There are built-in places where there are next steps, both for the writers and for the students. And some of them, it also just affects their career choice. Like maybe they say, and I have, again, another letter from a student who was saying, you know, I've been thinking about teaching a middle school, public school system, but I thought maybe I didn't have it in me. And this experience helped me really think that, hey, I love giving this feedback. I love being involved in this dynamic relationship with somebody who's trying to grow. So now I really have affirmed my desire to go out and become a public school teacher. And I think that's just as important as well.
In just a few moments, we're going to be talking with a colleague of yours, Lance, who has a unique story and a unique relationship to this program. But I want to thank you, Dr. Mendoza, for joining us. This has been fantastic. It's a beautiful program. And again, I just thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Josh. Greatly appreciate it. Good luck with everything.
Thank you. And now we want to bring in Lance Graham. He's an instructor in the English department at Arizona State University. Lance, so glad you could be here.
Nice to meet you. Welcome. And thank you for the invitation and the opportunity.
Thank you. We just spoke to Dr. Mendoza, who's sort of heading up the Penn project. You have a kind of a unique connection to this program. You came to it with a quite a different background. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I came to college itself with a very different background. So I did just under 5 years in Arizona State Prison. I had gotten some charges as a kid, 22. A couple years passed, and they decided to charge me with them. They basically offered me a long time for the initial charges, and it became an experience of trying to learn how to deal with the legal system in that way. I got it to a doable amount of time. I went in there and I used my time, unfortunately, to rehabilitate myself. I got into prison and I realized that it's a very easy place to get used to call home. It's pretty easy to not want a life of responsibility. And I realized that I wasn't set up for a life of responsibility. So I took my time in there and made it my time. I started asking questions of my own choices in life on what got me there and trying to reflect and understand what got me there. And from that, I came out and not really sure what to do with myself, just knowing I had a parole tail, knowing I had to not go back. I got into college. So I started at the community college, and from there I made it to ASU. From that journey, I now teach full-time at ASU. I teach writing courses and several courses online, that one of which I created, which is protest poetry. This class is something I came into kind of by surprise. I went out to meet with the founder of it and the person who was heading it up before us, Dr. Corey Wells. And I had actually went to go meet with her about her prison magazine that she publishes with writings of inmates. I had at that time, during my first semester teaching, with the extra free time on top of learning how to teach, I had actually wrote my own book of poetry. So I was reaching out just to discover a little bit about, you know, what type of things I could anticipate, trying to get it published and all that. And in that process of meeting with her about prison writing, I discovered this wonderful program. And to me, this program it's just something that we need more of. So for myself, I didn't realize it till after I got out, but once I got out, getting into college, learning, and especially literature and the humanities, they planted a seed. And that's what I see this program doing for those inmates who are able to be lucky enough to have it offered to them. A seed for self-rehabilitation. Unfortunately, America's prisons don't, in my opinion, set us up to rehabilitate. They set us up to be recycled. They set us up to recidivate and come back. So recidivism is something I learned about early in my release. One of my first research papers as a scholar, as an undergraduate, was looking and learning about this term recidivism. And then from there, it was all about learning how not to become a number. Those numbers were something like 75% at the time, returned within 3 years. When I learned this, I was still under 3 years out. So I was actually in just starting my second year of freedom by the time I got to GCC. So I was very much still learning what it meant to be free. And education luckily planted those seeds that allowed me, and it's still a learning process, still a path of dealing with roadblocks, but they allowed me the seeds to understand that I could be more than just a convict, that I could be more than just what I left from. And then the opportunity to share these seeds with other inmates was just too good to pass up on. The fact that we got it here at West was my mission. I actually heard that Tempe was discarding the program, kind of moving on from it, or whatever you would term that. So I took it on myself to.
I just wanted to just step in just for a second. So for the people who may not be familiar, Arizona State is huge. And so
Yes.
when you're talking about West and Tempe, could you sort of explain sort of geographically what you're talking about?
Yeah, so Tempe is the main campus. Tempe is the campus most people are familiar with when they hear about ASU. It is the campus that houses generally everything goes through it. It's kind of our main hub. However, we have several other campuses. West Campus is the one that I'm part of, the one where I did all my studies. And that is in the west side of Phoenix, in the Glendale, Phoenix area. And then we also have a downtown campus. So, and I believe there's one more, Polytechnic, which is out of Mesa. But essentially, we have 4 different campuses that are extensions of our main campus in Tempe. So Tempe, which is our main campus, had housed this program for quite a while. And for some reason, they decided that the time wasn't right to continue moving forward with this. So that's where we came in. We took something that they built, something they created, and found a way to give it a second life and to extend on it. And I was just happy for that chance. It's a great program. It's one that I would hate to see disappear. Just because, again, the seeds that it's planting, I think from this exposure, inmates realize that they can be much more than just inmates or ex-convicts. They realize with effort, with an attempt to grow, you can still grow. So that's kind of what it is for me. It's a way, and to quote from the wonderful Tupac Shakur, it's a way to grow roses from concrete. And essentially, when you think about prison is a place that is all concrete. Not a lot of light that gets in. So the idea of growing roses from the concrete of prison is kind of what I've sought to do. And what I'm seeing is possible with this wonderful program.
In your own experience, your encounter with the humanities that made you want something more, do you remember what specifically it was? Was it a poem? Was it a class?
Actually, yes, I do. It was a short story, and it wasn't one about prison, but it was one that related very much to what I was currently going through at that time. So, and to be honest, it was my first exposure to literature. I think maybe that's why it clicked so strong. I didn't really know what I was going to school for when I started out. I actually was planning on getting a business degree, thinking I could always open my own business when nobody will hire me. So that was initially what I went to college for. And upon taking this class, it was called English Literature 101 at GCC. And what it was is an introduction into English literature. So the story was by Ernest Hemingway, A Soldier's Home. It was about a soldier coming home from war and attempting to reintegrate into society. Something that I was feeling very much at the time as being an ex-convict, having to try to build a life again, and in a different way than being a soldier returning home. But that idea of reintegrating, that idea of people not necessarily understanding what it is to reintegrate and some of the pressure that they try to put on us to just jump back into life. That all was reflected from that story. It connected to me. And that's one thing I've learned from my experience of studying literature, of studying writing, is my experiences in life can speak to some of these writings I've read, whether it's Shakespeare, whether it's Hemingway. There's been areas where I am able to apply my own experiences, my own understanding, and that's what gives me, I think, the strength as a scholar is I come from places most scholars don't find the start to their degrees from. I take in everywhere I've been in life, and I apply that to my learning, to my teaching, to my understanding. Again, I think change is something that is very much possible, but we have to understand that it's not easy. So that story kind of allowed me to understand my change, my transition, my return home in a different way. But understanding the same thing that was returning with the soldier coming back from war was very much the same for me as an inmate returning home from prison.
I asked Dr. Mendoza about this, but I'm curious about your experience as well. In your observation, what do you see? What sort of impact does this program have on the students, the ASU students that you work with?
They realize they're making a difference. They realize they're giving people an opportunity to be heard that most of society, unfortunately, still wants to ignore. People don't realize, yes, people go to prison, they committed a crime. They made a mistake, essentially. And some mistakes are larger than others. That's not my point. I'm not here to judge. But the reality is they made a bad choice and they have to pay for it. They have to pay for it a lot of times with the rest of their life. Even, I think you'll know this, is you get home, the road isn't laid easily. I've been home 12 years. 12 years, I still get told where I can live, where I can work, what I can do. And that's part of the change, is society doesn't want to make our change easy. So for me, it's just seeing that they want to incite change. They want to hopefully be the person to spark that new idea, that new thought of what life can be after. And for me, there wasn't much in there that gave you any idea of what life could be after. There wasn't classes to rehabilitate. We lived in Jim Crow era conditions. I mean, the whole situation was one that I hated. And I realized that was my driving force, was to not return. I didn't really know how to do that. Education provided that for me. So from what I see with our students is that same will to hopefully plant a seed, and that seed grows into a rose. From that seed, they see possibility. They see their students. So my students, those inmates, they get to see that possibility of having someone to listen to them, having someone to give them feedback. And I think that's the greatest part of this, is seeing everybody really joining up to make a difference. It's an internship. It's more of something people take on because they want that responsibility. And the responsibility I've gotten is they want to inspire people to not give up. They understand, as a silenced population, as a population that you don't hear about too often, besides when it comes to questions of prison reform or police reform. Not a lot is given to the inmates, and they understand that this is their opportunity to give something to the inmates, something that hopefully will stick with them for the rest of their lives.
Lance Graham, thank you so much for joining us. This is it's been great.
All right, thank you.
Now we want to bring in Mike McGillicuddy, a volunteer, an Ignatian volunteer in charge of non-religious programming for Kolbe House, which is the Archdiocese of Chicago's prison outreach center or jail ministry in Chicago. Mike, great to have you with us.
Great to be here, Josh.
I just want to give a little context because I know Mike a little bit. We met a couple of years ago. I had been invited to lunch with him and a couple of friends of mine, Maella and Davide. And I'll never forget it. It was, I believe it was in March of that year, maybe 2 years ago. And we had a great lunch. It went on for like 2 hours. And so it was time for Mike to leave. We all get up. We go to sort of the little entrance exit area. We say our goodbyes. Mike leaves. Maella turns to me and she said, "Well, what did you think?" I said, "What I think is Mike has more energy than the three of us combined." That was my first impression, that this is a guy with a tremendous amount of energy and dedication to what he does. Well, speaking of what you do, tell everyone what you do with Kolbe House and at the Cook County Jail.
Okay, so the Ignatian Volunteer Corps is a national program in about 40 cities where semi-retired and retired Catholics principally donate 2 full days a week, 10 months of the year, to working with the marginalized, with the economically poor and marginalized. And my assignment, along with 2 other Ignatian volunteers, is at Kolbe House, the Archdiocese Ministry to people affected by incarceration. And I do a little bit of everything. I do certainly some reentry work, especially with people that are struggling with mental health issues. But the predominant assignment is in creating a ministry that is not religiously focused to complement the religiously focused ministry we already have to people inside the jail. So for example, I might do classes on substance abuse treatment or anger management or strengths, self-awareness, things like that. So we are capped at a fixed number of people that can do religious ministry inside the jail. And so our complement, or our way of complementing that, is to provide some, for example, financial literacy training, book club, houses of healing is a very popular program used in jails and prisons around the country.
Can
So
you,
it's
what
sort of
is that?
psychosocial.
Can you sort of explain what is Houses of Healing?
Okay, the title, Houses of Healing, presumes that much as a retreat house might be, a prison or a jail can be a house of healing for someone who wants to sort of do the work, who wants to really take that on and use this as an opportunity for self-reflection. And so this is a program, there's a book that goes with it, available both in English and in Spanish. And it's sort of a guide through talking about wounds and healing and identity. A lot like, who are you anyway, would be sort of a lead-in question to Houses of Healing. So this is something I love doing, and has been pretty well received within the jail.
I was up in Chicago with you back in March, right before the lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
And you drove me by the Cook County Jail where you volunteer. And I don't know, I had never been there before, and I'm thinking, okay, it's probably like a sort of a high rise, but I'm thinking sort of one building, maybe a couple hundred, and I don't know. I really had no conception of what it was. And we drive by, and I'm on the passenger side of the car, obviously, and I'm looking out the window, and I'm thinking, okay, well, this is it, and this is huge. It's an entire complex. And then you point out to me, on your side, it's on the other side of the street as well. How many? It's like its own little town. How many inmates do they have there at the Cook County Jail?
Okay, so I would say, Joshua, that 10 years ago, they probably had 10,000 or more. There were more than 10,000 people. It was about 5,500 when COVID came, and it's probably under 5,000 right now, somewhat under 5,000 now. And there's a couple of reasons. There have been some bail reform movement in Illinois that has reduced the population. And then there's a lot of people that are on home surveillance or ankle bracelets right now that has reduced the number of people in the jail. Okay, so I think that we're at about 5,000. But it's a huge complex. It goes for, I would say, 5 city blocks long by 2 wide. It's huge. There are, I don't know, 20 different buildings. A year ago, there was, because of the reduction in population, there was a lot of space, right? You could use an empty tier for programming. At one point in, I think, April, the New York Times identified Cook County Jail. Sorry about that. Cook County Jail identified, the New York Times identified Cook County Jail as the hot spot in the country for COVID, okay? And they went through a very difficult period. They did a really good job, but one of the things that happened is that they opened up all of those empty tiers to have people 1 in a cell rather than 2, okay? And so it's spread out more. So actually the complex is more occupied than it has been for a very long time, but very many fewer detainees are included.
What actually inspired you or provoked you to become involved in jail ministry?
It's sort of a funny story. I was a college student in Memphis between 66 and 69. A highlight for me during those years was marching with Martin Luther King. But during that very same period of time, a number of us were volunteers at the Shelby County Penal Farm. Memphis had at that time a penal farm where people would work out their sentence on the land. And I did some literacy volunteering there. Then if you fast forward maybe 10, 12 years, in my early professional career, a federal jail was built in downtown Chicago. And the backstory is, I think, that there was a lot of complaints by some of the detainees inside the jail about conditions at Cook County Jail, where I am right now, that prompted the building of this 26-story high-rise in downtown Chicago. And I was the original personnel director there and hired the original staff. So then if we fast forward another 15 years, I did some volunteer work for the Safer Foundation. And then another stretch, and I did some volunteer work for Kolbe House. And then that's has led me to where I am today.
Has this work changed you in any way? What has it provoked in you? What has it changed in you?
Oh gosh, that's, I'm drawn to the people that I work with. I mean, I think I always have been, but I'm more consciously drawn to being with them. I mean, I fear that a lot of people are frightened by and even some repelled by people that are incarcerated, and I don't feel that way at all. And I enjoy being with them. We just got back in the jail after a 6-month absence. I missed it greatly. So what has it done to change me? I think that the detainees are incredible instructors in spirituality. The depth of their spirituality puts me to shame, puts many people that I know to shame. So I'm more spiritually grounded than I was before I did that. I think I'm probably more in touch with how hurt people and how hurt people can heal than I was before. I guess I'm more in touch with the fact that the system as it's currently constituted is really not, it's not really helping the way it could if we had a more restorative justice approach rather than punishment approach. All of those things, Joshua.
A lot of people would say, well, I would never go into a prison to volunteer or to minister or whatnot because I don't have anything in common with those people in there. What would be your response to that?
I would say I would gently indicate that it depends on whether your focus is on differences or similarities. I mean, if you choose to focus on differences, they are poorer people at the margin. They are more likely to be people of color, okay? They are more likely to have had interruptions in their education and so on. So if you want to focus on differences, you'll find differences. But I don't think that helps. I think that that's what's really beautiful is to make the heart-to-heart connection, to really lean into conversations with people. So for example, a big part of what we do is focus on strengths. So I'm going to do a group tomorrow morning. And in that group tomorrow morning, I'm going to lead off with, what's right with you? To each person in the group, I'm going to say, what's right with you? And those that are new, that haven't been exposed to me before, are going to say, huh, what do you mean? What's right with me? And I'm going to say, what's right with you? And they're still going to be sort of bedazzled by the question. And then I'm going to say, now, wait a minute. If I said, what's wrong with you? You'd give me a long list. Is that not so? And they say, yes. And I said, but I'm not interested. To be perfectly frank, I'm really not interested in what's wrong with you. I know there's plenty wrong with all of us, right? But I'm much more interested in what's right with you. So we work a lot on strengths. And we do a strength survey. Tomorrow we'll be handing them back to about 15 or 20 people. And I'm going to miss this a little bit because everybody's masked, of course, now. But in the past, one of the best parts of my work there was handing out this survey, which indicates each person's 5 signature strengths. And I say, is this you? And almost universally, they light up and say yes, right? And the fact of the matter is, that is not a common experience in their lives, that a people have affirmed what is best in them. So I mean, I love the instructional role to begin with, but I particularly love working in this particular setting.
Now, Kolbe House also helps people once they get out of the jail. Have you had? Can you think of any instances or people rather, not instances, who you worked with as a volunteer in the jail, and then you see them after they get out.
Yes, yes. In fact, we are, as you know, we are 2 blocks from Cook County Jail. So between us and the jail, there's a Popeyes. And my dream is putting a big sign on the top of Popeyes that say, first stop, Kolbe House, because we're just 2 blocks away, right? And so, yes, we do have people that come right out of jail and contact us. We have people, for example, a standard part of a group that we do with people that have substance abuse treatment concerns is we will find out for them before they leave what are the 12-step meetings closest to where they're going to be. And then they can stop by and pick that up along with a bus card and some food and clothing and so on. So yes, we endeavor to do that. Some people we stay in touch with for a considerable period of time. Many people we don't. But I don't consider that a failure. There are lots of people that don't want themselves sort of defined by their history in the correctional system. And if they've got a support system elsewhere, a community to blend in with, wonderful. But for those people that don't, we want to be there, particularly in those critical first few weeks.
Mike, thank you so much for joining us. I hope to see you again soon. You know, I was up there at the start of the lockdown. Kolbe House had been kind enough to invite me to participate in 4 different events over the course of a weekend and give some talks. And so I gave the first talk. It was a Friday night. And then we got word that the other 3 talks had been canceled because basically everything was shutting down because of COVID. At least that's what I like to think. I would prefer to think it wasn't because of the quality of that first talk I gave.
The quality of that first talk was excellent. And when you can come back, we want you back. And for those of you hearing this, if you've never heard Joshua speak, tell his story. You really, it's a must hear.
Oh, that's very kind of you. I can't wait to see you again, Mike. Hope to see you soon.
Okay, take care.
Take care.
Bye now.
Hi, I want to welcome Ron Zeilinger. He is the founder of Dismas Ministry, which is a national Catholic prison ministry based out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He's retired now. And but I wanted to bring him in because of his founding of this and the fact that Dismas Ministry this year is celebrating its 20th anniversary. So first of all, Ron, welcome. Great to have you.
Good to be here. Thanks, Joshua.
In the interest of full disclosure, Ron, several years ago, back when he was still running Dismas Ministry, he invited me to be on the board. So I am a board member of Dismas. So I'm not an impartial observer when it comes to the work of Dismas Ministry. But I wanted to talk to you, Ron, about the founding of it, because a lot of people who found prison ministries or who are involved in some way in that area, it's because of they were in prison themselves, they had a family member, they had some sort of direct experience. I don't think that's necessarily the case with you, but I could be wrong. So I wanted to ask you, what led to you founding this ministry?
Well, there's a lot of facets to it, but first of all, I always want to honor my dad because he's the only family member that we spent some time behind bars, and not long, just one overnight. He and a bunch of farmers were protesting farm prices back in the 60s, and they did kind of a crossroad blockage, and they got arrested and spent a night in jail. And then the next morning, the judge lined up all these farmers in their bib overalls, and he just said to them, boys, behave yourselves, go home, and that was it. But I was proud of my dad, he was standing up for his principles, and it got him behind bars. So that's, the only brief encounter of the Zeilinger family. But for many years, I was a seminarian with the Priests of the Sacred Heart. In fact, I still wear the Dehonian cross, it's called. And it's a large network, large family of people all over the globe who are involved with Priests of the Sacred Heart and their ministries. But I was a seminarian, and then after I left the seminary, I still continued to work in ministry with them, and 10 years in South Dakota with the Lakota people. And then I came to Milwaukee and was still working with them in a different capacity, more like marketing, advertising, and communications for the order. But in that setting, a lot of letters were coming in from all over the country to the order asking for materials and spiritual support, et cetera. And I noticed a pattern after a while of a lot of Catholic inmates and Catholic people in prison ministry, asking the order for help because they seem to lack Bibles, prayer material, study materials, all the things that the prisoners were writing in their letters saying, we want all that stuff just like the Protestants have, because they didn't have it. They would go to the chapel and the shelves for the Protestants would be all full of things, and then they'd look at the Catholic shelves and it'd be practically empty. So I was kind of surprised by that. And my correspondence in particular with now who's a good friend, Jim in Denver, who was in a federal prison in Colorado for 4 years. During that time, he and I struck up a correspondence. And I always tell Jim, you're the co-founder of Dismas Ministry, because his insights that he shared with me about what it was like to be Catholic behind bars and experience some of the lacks, of response for pastoral ministry, it really opened my eyes to some needs. So thanks to Jim. But anyway, so that stirred in me the interest that I should look into this more and see there must be somebody out there doing it. There has to be some organization like the Catholic Gideon Bible, providing all this stuff, and I didn't find much. So I was surprised, and I thought, okay, well, then that's an opportunity for a ministry. I did a little survey of as many Catholics as I could find around the country who were doing prison or jail ministry. And in that survey, I asked them, what would you need to carry on your ministry? How could we support you if we were an organization? And their responses also formed the platform for Dismas Ministry, which is the same today, which is provide us with free Bibles, Catholic Bibles, provide us with prayer books, prayer materials, rosaries, provide us with Catholic study materials. So after that, I thought, okay, I'm going to start this. And kudos to the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, and especially at that time, the Chancellor, because I tried a couple ways to start Dismas Ministry. I asked a couple other religious orders to sponsor it. I tried starting it on my own. I found out that you got to have some credibility if you're going to do fundraising, because people don't know who you are and they look at you like, is this a scam or what, So anyway, I went to the Archdiocese and I said, how does a layperson get something like this started? And the Chancellor, Barbara Ann Cusack, she got a little team together, and she was of tremendous help. And then this team formed the first board for Dismas Ministry. The members were stellar. They gave me, Mr. Nobody, instant credibility, because they were all top-notch people in their fields, judges, correctional chaplains, all sorts of good people. And the first board meeting was, as we said, 20 years ago. And I had $48 in my pocket that various friends had given me as cash gifts, to say, here, use this for the ministry. And then when the board set the bylaws together and, and refined the mission, then they told me, okay, go ahead, raise money, it's all yours, go for it. So I had $48 and with some stationery that I printed, I made appeals to Catholic parishes and Catholic orders and Catholic foundations. And the first great watershed moment was that December. I got a response from a Catholic foundation that sent $25,000. And I remember sitting in my car, bursting into tears, thanking God, because I thought, this is going to go, people out there get it, they're going to get behind this ministry. So that was a great moment. And then every year, under the patronage of our Mother Mary, I placed all the fundraising under her. She's the purse keeper at Nazareth, when she'd go to market or come home or whatever. And if there was a shortage of money, I think her and Jesus somehow made it work, and Joseph also. But anyway, so she's the patroness. And every year we made enough money to expand and grow. And so from Wisconsin, the initial project, we added several states every year until I think about 2009 or 10. We could actually say we're national, we're sending our materials to prisons in every state of the union. So it was really a grace of God. You know, you feel like you don't like to be used by people, you know, but it's okay to be used by God because, you know, you get some stuff done then. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And I wanted to add that my training or my formation with the Priests of the Sacred Heart, that's always been very important to me. And it had everything to do with being on the side of the outcast, the marginalized, because Father DeHoon, the founder, used to say, you know, if you're going to be devoted to the heart of Jesus, you're going to be devoted to the poor, the outcast, and the suffering, because that's where who are close to the heart of Jesus. So that's always been the case with me, and it's been a guiding light, so to speak, in all of my ministries. So,
did you ever think it would that 20 years later you'd be celebrating an anniversary?
Well, you always hope that, you know, it's going to continue, and it's always under, you know, by the grace of God, you know, and along the way you make some advances and then you make some mistakes. But in general, I think the Spirit, you know, guided me enough that I didn't make too many mistakes, that it just kept growing every year. So, and then the point at which I decided that, you know, I need to step aside, it's time for new eyes and new vision, because you don't want the founder to hang around too long, you know. So I found a great executive director in Tyler Curtis, and she's just a great person for taking over the reins. She understands it, she gets it, she's done ministry in her past. She's articulate and got all around good spirit. So it's in good hands and it's continuing. So praise God.
Over and above the Bibles and the study materials, which are great, what do you think the inmates really benefit from? What is it that they really need that they're getting from Dismas and other ministries, over and above just a Bible or a study guide?
I think just the context, you know, today's first reading is so appropriate to what we're talking about, because it's from Ephesians, where Paul is saying, you know, I, Paul, a prisoner, and then he goes on to talk about how comforting it is for his fellow Christians to be, you know, praying for him, and I would assume visiting him, because he mentions about, you know, keeping the bond of charity and so on. And that, you know, he talks about the body of Christ. And I think for prisoners to be in touch with Dismas Ministry, and they've expressed it many times in their letters. We have, you know, kept many of those letters as beautiful testimonials. They talk about, thank God somebody out there cares, you know, that somebody's thinking of me. And we don't really, you know, understand how the impact is, how powerful it is on a prisoner to get a Bible or a rosary or prayer book, or even just a letter from the outside that says, hey, we're thinking of you, we haven't forgotten you, you know, so you're important to the body of Christ. And so that makes a big difference for them, just that somebody remembers them, you know. And I like the word remember, because that's kind of our motto from the good thief on the cross, Jesus, remember me, you know, when you enter your kingdom. And I think that's what Dismas Ministry hopefully does for prisoners. It just reminds them that we're remembering them. They're not forgotten, you know.
Yeah, well, Dismas Ministry, it's just needed, that you referenced earlier, and I know from personal experience and in working in prison ministry as well, there's just not that much. I think I was really shocked at how little there is for Catholic inmates. And it's not because of any kind of hard-heartedness or whatnot on behalf of Catholics. I think maybe, and tell me what you think about this, you may think I'm wrong, that maybe we think that, you know, we tithe and that takes care of everything, that someone's handling,
Mm-hmm.
you know, these various issues. And oftentimes that's just not the case. So what would you say to encourage someone who might be thinking about involving themselves in prison ministry?
Yeah, I would be I would joke a little bit and say, welcome to the forgotten work of mercy. Because, you know, all the other works of mercy, they seem, you know, feed the hungry, visit the sick, bury the dead, all of those things, they seem, I don't want to say easy enough, but people get them and they're willing to pitch in and immediately help. I think when it comes to prison ministry, they get a little stuck because they don't know exactly how to go about it. They may not even be called to do in-prison visiting, but there's a lot of other things they can do. You know, pray and write letters or support ministries like ours or others. Yeah, I think the ministry is one that's needed, and even though it's not one that everybody is called to, but people need to pray and discern, and you know, maybe they're being called. The hard part is getting your toe in the water, but I always say go with somebody who knows what they're doing first, and then check it out. And you might find, again, as we have, you know, testimonials from people who are in prison ministry, it's a real joy. They end up being, they feel like they're getting so much out of it that they come home really happy and lighthearted, even though they've been in prison for an hour or two visiting these men or women. So, yeah.
Ron Zeilinger, founder of Dismas Ministry. You can contact Dismas Ministry. Check out their website at dismasministry.org. Ron, thanks so much.
All right. Peace. Thank you so much, too.